Hello, friends. Welcome. We are really glad to have you all join us today in this webinar on the occasion of Father's Day. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are based in. My name is Laxman Belbase. I work at the Global Secretariat, and
I'm Joni van der Sant, and I work at the Global Secretariat of MenCare Alliance as well.
So we will be co-moderating this discussion webinar today. And a special welcome to all of you to this special webinar. In this webinar, we'll be discussing on innovations in policy advocacy to advance men's caregiving. And as you may know, that MenCare is a global fatherhood campaign which seeks to reach 50-50 when it comes to men and women's participation in unpaid care and domestic work, and is active in over 45 countries now. As we will be celebrating Father's Day this weekend in many countries around the world, we wanted to take a look at how we can not only work together to influence individuals and communities, but entire countries through innovative advocacy techniques that can lead to, in fact, impactful change and our collective vision of equal share of paid and unpaid care work by men as much as women do. So just few technical matters. All of you are by default muted. Is the way the webinar has been set up, and you will see under your names something called raise hand option. So if you click on that, your hand will be raised and we will be able to see who has raised hands, and that is to be used if you have any questions or want to express anything. And also then if and then probably you will have to use the chat option, which is if you click on the button called participants, if you go hover your cursor over the screen, you will get this participants, and below the participants there will be also chat option on, that is the fourth option. If you click there, you'll get a chat box, and you can type in your questions during the presentations to the panelists. And we suggest to change on the to option. It will give you options to send to all panelists only, or all panelists and attendees, or to specific presenters. So we would encourage you to use the option all panelists and attendees so that we all can see your questions. And if you have any specific questions during the presentations, feel free to write them, and we will have 5 minutes after each presentations to take your question to the specific presenters as well. Yes. So with that technical note, so Nina from Promundo will be supporting us technically on the backhand side. So if we face any challenges, please feel free to let us know, and we will try to sort out the challenges you are having as well, and as much as our own limits with the IT. So today we'll be hearing from our amazing friends all over the world, across the world. I think it's quite spread now, from our MenCare partners around the world, from Netherlands to Turkey to South Africa, around how they have been using evidences, data, and creativity in their advocacy effort to influence changes in legislation, policies, and any protocols in the support of the redistribution of unpaid care work, as well as care work in general. We do hope this session will be, and we are confident, will be very, very informative and interactive for you all. We will be taking questions, as I mentioned, from you all after each of the presentations, and also at the end of the presentation. So if you have any specific ones, we will have 5 minutes just after the presenters. And for generic discussions, we will have some time after all the presentations. And then we'll do our best to sort of cater to all of your questions and see how much we can answer or respond to those questions. Anything, Joni? Yeah. So to start off, without taking much of your time, we'll start with Ilze Smit, Advocacy Officer at Rutgers, Netherlands, who will present her interesting and quite inspiring, innovative idea in Netherlands to advocate for an expansion of paternity leave. So over to you, Ilze.
Thank you so much, Laxman, for that introduction. Yeah, I would like to present today the Dutch case for engaged fatherhood in the Netherlands. Next. Maybe the Netherlands is not as emancipated as you might think. We're currently ranking number 32 on the global gender gap index, with Mozambique, Rwanda, and Belgium above us. And that's mainly because of our big pay gap between men and women, and having most women work part-time. We have a strong motherhood ideology where I can tell a lot about, but we don't have time for that. We want to go quickly to the strategies that we use, but I'm happy to share more on that later. And one of the things that we found very severe in the Netherlands is that 35% of the mothers experience pregnancy discrimination at work. And last but not least, 2 paid days of paternity leave for fathers is currently our policy. Next. So this is just an overview of the graphs of the Europe, where you see how many women and men are working part-time. And with the green circle, you see the Netherlands. And it's really, I think, outstanding that you see that over 80% of women in the Netherlands are working part-time, and less than 17% of men are working part-time. And you also see that it's not decreasing over time. And if you compare it to other European countries, it's really outstanding, I would say. So this is really one of the things we see as a problem. Next. So our advocacy goal was really based on the urgency to push emancipation for women and men in the Netherlands towards a concept of modern parenthood. And we see modern parenthood as that every parent is capable to optimally contribute to the development of their young child and to combine this care with his or her work. Next. And in order to achieve that, we advocated for a non-transferable and paid paternity leave that is equal in length to women, also 3 months, to prevent pregnancy discrimination at work, among other things, among other reasons. We were promoting solo care for fathers, and it should be open to all partners of mothers, despite sexual and gender orientation or identities. We run this project together with Women Inc. and Bernard van Leer Foundation, which made it interesting because Women Inc. came really from the women's empowerment, with a women's empowerment background, and Bernard van Leer Foundation really from the child development background, and we from the fathers, and that combined, with that, all those interests combined, we started this project. Next. So in 2017, we had parliamentary elections, and we started 1 year before the elections to influence the programs of the political parties, which was really advocacy behind closed doors, so to say. So we had a lot of meetings with those political parties to discuss the importance of paternity leave. And during the election campaigns, it became one of the topics that was discussed. It was about a good balance between care and work in families. And last, we established the platform Fatherhood and gained a lot of media attention with research, actions, and events. And I want to show more on that. Next. It resulted in a new government that agreed in October 2017 to increase paternity leave to 5 paid days directly after birth and give partners an additional 5 weeks of leave in the first 6 months for 17% of their salary. So in total, there will be 6 weeks of leave in the Netherlands from 2020 onwards. Next. So after that announcement, we were of course very happy, and we went on the streets and asked fathers to reflect on this. And in the YouTube video, you can see all the reactions of the fathers who were very, very happy. And this father, he said, the benefit of paternity leave is you can grow together with your baby. And next, another father an older father said, 5 weeks leave, that's still too little. What I remember of being a father, not so much. I wasn't there. And I think that is really why we have done this for future generations, that fathers can be there for their children and for their families. Next. So what was our strategy? We did a very thorough power analysis. We created a platform for fatherhood. We had unusual allies, the trade union, companies that are front runners in family-friendly policies, professors, writers, celebrities, and we ensured to get a lot of media attention. Next. So this is just a translation of our power analysis that I briefly want to show. I can tell a lot about how this power analysis works, but I really want to share that based on this power analysis, we decided on our strategy. So if you see on the left top corner, you see the biggest employers organizations and the Liberal Party. So they are most influential, but they were also very much an opponent to paternity leave. You also see that currently in Europe, where the European Union is pushing for paternity leave, where the employers organization is really lobbying against this leave system. Now, one of the strategies that we use is, if you look at the left, on the right side, I think for you, you will see pro companies big. So these are companies that are already supportive of this leave. And we gave them a platform so that it was shown to the rest of the society that not all companies were against these family-friendly policies. Another strategy that we choose are the blue squares, science, engaged fathers, and civil society. They were already present in media, but it was not a really uniform message. So what we did with the platform, we all brought them together in the platform Fatherhood, and we gave them more voice, so they were becoming more influential. So in that way, we tried to counter the opposition that there was in society. The yellow ones are the political parties, and we worked with all of them individually and making messages to work for them that responds to their vision and so on. Next. So the platform Fatherhood was really to collect stories and evidence from society and to amplify the voices of society to parliament and government. One of the things we did was to have a website, which was very helpful. Next. So this was a little bit our theory behind the platform. As you can see, the megaphone in the middle, that is really bringing together all those voices and all those interests, and by bringing them together, you can really be louder towards parliament and government. And we did that via direct advocacy in meetings and events, but also via the media. Next slide. And this was, I think, one of our key moments in time. It was an action that we did on the square right in front of Parliament. And we left strollers there with baby dolls and some noise or some audio of a crying baby. And we asked all parliamentarians to come out and look after the babies. And there was a note, "Can you look after my baby? I need to work. I need to go to work, Daddy." So the parliamentarians came, a lot of media came, and one of the main actors at that moment, the leader of the Christian Democrats, was coming outside as well. And you see that in the second picture. And we were walking around behind him with those strollers, trying to get him to support the cause for paternity leave, which was, I think, one of the most funniest moments in the campaign. Next slide. So I was also asked to reflect on the challenges that we faced, and maybe you recognize that sometimes it becomes a women versus men issue, paternity leave. Is it something for men? And we had a lot of women's organizations supporting the cause, and they were all mentioned on the platform. But we noticed that there was the risk that it would become a women's issue. And that it also was more likely to succeed if men and fathers were spokesperson. Now, that for me as a feminist is a challenge, because that is the situation you are in and you want to change the situation, but then you have to bring forward men. And one of the things we did is to have a message that really everyone benefits from it, and children, women, men, society, employers. And we created a database with spokespersons. So we had a diverse range of fathers that could be a spokesperson, but also mothers, lesbian couples, gay fathers, so that when the media reached out to us and asked for a spokesperson, that we could really bring forward different voices in the media. Next slide. So what's next? Coming half year, we will ensure, we have to ensure that the bill will go through Parliament. There's still some opposition, but we are confident that we will make it. And we have to work with the ministry on cultural change at the workplace and in care, because next to policy, this was a very important step for the Netherlands, but now it's time to really change the culture around motherhood ideology and what we see as the father as breadwinner. Next slide. So I want to conclude with, I think, those two funny posters. One left is of 60, 70 years ago from the trade union, and the other one is our picture that we used on the leaflet that we have developed based on the MenCare paternity leave platform. Well, the images hasn't changed so much over the last 70 years, but at least the policy has changed. So thanks. I think
yeah. Thank you, Ilze. That was amazing. Really inspiring to see how you have been able to influence the policymakers and the strategy that you used. There is a question from the chat box of probably Bruce missed that part. Who conducted the power analysis and who was involved in doing that?
So we did that with the three organizations that I mentioned, Women Inc., Rutgers, and the Bernard van Leer Foundation. But we had some conversations before making that. So to really verify if our assumptions were right. Yeah.
And you know, based on your analysis, so when you started mobilizing, did you face any challenges, you know, upfront challenges with your call, either by the politicians or any other groups in general? Were there any specific?
Yeah, the employers organization had a quite strong campaign against paternity leave, even using not evidence-based arguments, and saying that in the Netherlands, employees have so much holidays that they don't need paternity leave. And another argument they used was that they really couldn't miss the male people in the office, which I always find a funny argument, because apparently they can miss the women during pregnancy leave, but men were absolutely not missable. So yeah, it was a strong opposition from that end.
Great. Yeah, and Ilse, we have two more questions here from the chat box. One from Valerie Bichonmeyer, who is asking, let me just scroll up, that this is a very interesting intervention and thank you for sharing. And that it's actually an experience that is worth sharing much more widely. So the question is if there's any written article about what was presented. And then we had another question that is, how did you appeal directly to the parliament members beyond the demonstration with the dolls and the strollers? And this is a question from Charlotte Moss.
Thanks for that, and thanks for the suggestion to write an article about it. It is something we are planning. I just don't want to, is that an English word, jinx it? I want to first go that the bill goes through Parliament and that it's really there before celebrating it too much. So I feel it's just too early to go out there. And on the way, like in every country it's different, but what we did is really starting early before the elections to engage with parliament members, but not only with parliamentarians, but really also with the political parties and everyone who was developing those political party programs. And that was like more than 1 year before the election started. And I could really, what I could really recommend, or what I noticed in the conversations we had with parliamentarians was that everyone brings their personal situation, their family, on this topic to the table. So I learned that to first talk about this issue in a personal way before moving to all the science and all the arguments that we have to increase paternity leave. But if you, for example, talk to a parliamentarian who's a single mother and is really struggling to raise her child in the best way, then paternity leave is not really, they're not really receptive to the message that paternity leave is very important.
Thank you. That was amazing, Ilze. And
thank you. Thank you all.
Look forward to reading the article once you are in a situation to write it. So moving on, so we'll move on to Suna Hanöz, who is the Director of International Programs of ACHEV in Turkey. And she will be presenting with us today around their experiences in collaborating with private sectors to support them in making workplace reforms and advocacy for involved fatherhood. So Suna, over to you.
Hi there. I hope you can see me and hear me clearly.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right then. So it's a great honor to have this opportunity for me to speak at this webinar. So I'd like to share the work we do at ACHEV, and I would like to thank MenCare, which allows us excellent ways to collaborate and learn from one another. We can look at slide number 1, and I will be talking about how we have been partnering with the private sector for involved fatherhood and what that means. You can go to slide number 2. So just a quick snapshot on ACHEV. Since 1993, ACHEV has through the Development of Children. And in that respect, we develop and implement evidence-based programs in the fastest way. And I'll be talking about the work we do in relation to fatherhood today. Slide number 3. So upon this journey, let me tell you about what we've been doing and how, for us, masculinities and fatherhood have been linked. Now, with no doubt, obviously, they're closely interrelated and they intersect in multiple ways. Each is essential to achieve the other. And in that respect, we train fathers to impact fatherhood in child development. Now, to facilitate broader and a long-term shift in fathers' attitudes on equal parenting, we have to advocate, and in fact we realize we have to create advocates for change. Hence slide number 4. We've been using fatherhood as an entry point because we want to talk about a normative shift in society, and while we're impacting fathers individually through our father support program, and we see fatherhood as a space for the recreation of gender roles, therefore we also know that strengthening involved fatherhood means a change in the direction of a more equitable household, which specifically democratizing the home environment. And the question now for ACHEV has been, how can we strengthen fatherhood in such a way that it can evolve into a societal discussion of gender equality? Or how can we impact laws and legislations and work structures so that we can speak about an enabling an environment, a supporting environment? So father support program in slide number 5, you can see I'm guessing most of you may know ACE's program. Since 1996, we've been running this with fathers who have children between the ages of 3 to 11. These are groups that are held weekly in where 15 to 20 fathers come together. And this model is, yes, have been proving and working very highly effective. Now, how do we actually carry this on to a work setting, and we can advocate for the private sector to collaborate with us and take their role in this whole picture? You can move to slide number 6. Now, we realized we have to do evidence-based advocacy. And for that, we had to have some data in our hand to be able to go and tell them what does fatherhood in Turkey look like. So we carried out a research, sort of exactly like the State of the Fathers research that Promundo and MenCare have been launching all around the world. And to be able to actually work on a supporting and enabling environment for fatherhood, we had to show what are the risk factors and what are the promoting factors for involved fatherhood in Turkey, i.e. the legislative frameworks and the structural work conditions and the cultural work codes I'm talking about. So we basically wanted to bring the involved fatherhood agenda to the forefront of the public conscious. This was done together in partnership with Bernard Van Leer. And when we approached our private sector stakeholders, the report actually provided an essential first step on policy changes and to remove workplace barriers and to actually support a greater paternal involvement in children's lives. Because the data was very informing and at the same time extremely alarming. For example, our business private sector partners were very shocked to hear that 28% of the fathers did not even know about their right to paternal leave. And only 44% reported that they used their paternal leave. At the same time, 21% of the fathers were not able to use their paternal leave despite knowing it because their employers did not allow them to. So these are just some very simple examples. Slide number 7. So I don't know if you'll be able to guess the number of men working in Turkey's private sector. We're a country of almost 80 million, the population. And guess what? 10 million men work in the private sector in Turkey, which constitutes 53% of the national workforce. So this really meant that we can actually make a huge change if we can bring the private sector into this game. And how can we empower the companies on the notion of involved fatherhood? What can they do? So I'm talking about actually mobilizing them, mobilizing the high level leaders in the business world and the employees to support for engaged fathering. And the private sector is extremely important, an important actor in reconstructing certain messages and values. So, for example, just recently, we've come to a point where a famous diaper company in Turkey has agreed to change the layout of their advertisements, where it's not only going to be the mother putting on the diaper on the child. This is a huge step in its own, because diaper is the one very classic example, right? Because if once those private companies, and especially the communication and the advertisement companies, come to the understanding that mothers are not the only or the primary caregiver, then we can actually talk about the private sector combating for women's participation in the workforce and supporting gender equality. Hence, I'm talking about laying the groundwork to remove those certain barriers impacting the legislative frameworks and how these companies can actually support their employees. Slide number 8, you can actually see the companies that we work with. You may recognize some multinational big corporations such as UPS, Gap, Dell, the computer guys, Algida, the ice cream maker, Procter & Gamble, Marks & Spencer, Vodafone, the phone, Benefit, the makeup company, and various banks in Turkey, and many more Turkish big corporations. So slide number 9. So basically, we gave the private sector a research study showing the state in Turkey, and then we discussed and talked about the notion of involved fatherhood. And then after that, we actually gave them a toolkit that they can take back to their companies and start on a new action plan, and for them to think about what they can do to see and respect the fathers under their roof. So back in November, we actually had a huge workshop. That's the picture you're looking at right now, where 50 participants, high-level directors in marketing, communications, human resources, manufacturing, from leading banks, like I told you, to the financial sector and other companies came. And that was the beginning. Since then, so many other companies are actually approaching Achev and requesting gender equality or fatherhood seminars. Now, our goal is to not just leave it at a few workshops, but to encourage them to request and start taking fatherhood programs or provide fatherhood programs under their roof to their employees, which has begun with a few companies. Because during these workshops, we're urging the companies to think about what role can they take in promoting involved fatherhood, and to discuss about how they can advocate for paternal leave, or how they can create some childcare support services under their company, how they can create, if they're a company that is producing certain products, how can they be mindful of the messages they give through their products? How can they review their policies for work conditions to support new dads, for example, who are coming a little late to work to drop off their children at school, which is typically something that often mothers do or expected of mothers at these work settings. And like I said, how can they support father support programs for their employees? Slide number 10. So this is truly just the beginning, and this is just a quick snapshot to give you, to tell you what we're doing and what we've been dealing with here in Turkey. And in the last few months, like I said, the marketing world here have approached and started to actually change some of the advertised ads that they've created. We feel like, okay, these are small steps which are going to actually lead into bigger things. And one company, you can look at slide 11, just actually recently said, you know what, we can't actually sit and wait for policy changes. We have to begin from somewhere. And after these trainings, I would like to announce that our company, we expand the 5-day paternal leave now to 10 days. Because we're talking about small numbers, but doubling the current 5 days is actually a really nice step. And I think I've come to the end of my time. So on behalf of Achev, I'd like to thank all our stakeholders in the private sector for their great contribution. And I can take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Suna. That was extremely comprehensive and really amazing what you have been able to do there in Turkey. Really inspiring on the promising example on how do we really engage with corporate sectors on doing this policy level changes. Amazing. Any questions, Joni?
Yeah, we have a couple. Well, the first one is from Ilze Smit, very practical. Can you share the report or toolkit with everyone? Is it available? And then there's two questions from Adil Abdo. The first one is, how were you able to attract fathers to come to your sessions? And the other question from this person is, how do you mobilize the advertisement companies to change the ads to be sensitive to fatherhood?
Okay, so question number one, I can certainly share the reports. Actually, two other new reports came out. They have not been translated into English, but once they also are translated, I can send it. So whatever is already translated into English, after this webinar, I can share it with you guys. You'll see my email. You should see my email on the very first slide. Feel free to email us and I can share more. The second question, how do we attract fathers? It's actually a very typical question that is often asked to us because one doesn't expect an organization, I guess, to have such broad father support programs. Now, all our programs are based on a volunteer basis and are carried on by volunteer trainers as well. And so we actually, until now, we've been partnering with the Ministry of Education for the longest time, more than 15 years. And we partnered with schools. So counselor teachers would be advertising the program in the schools. So fathers of the children in that school would volunteer and attend the program. Recently, in the last 2 years, we've started to actually partner with municipalities. Similarly, working with the municipality would provide us a network where Aceh is also quite well known. So hear from one another and men attend the program. One small but very important trick is that the program always runs in the evenings so that men can attend if they're working, or even if they're not working. For cultural codes, it probably feels better for them to come to a session in the evening. And I can tell you much more, and whoever is interested, please feel free to contact me. What was the last question? I forgot. Oh, how do we mobilize the advertising agencies? Yes. So just like the way we've sat together in workshops with the private sector companies, advertising agencies have played a huge critical role because, like I said, they're the ones who are doing the communications for these big companies. And we've actually had separate sessions with them, trainings with them, where we sit and discuss, which is quite challenging because while people say they're open to learning about these things, and when you're talking about involved fatherhood, you start going into to the discussion of providing equal opportunities to your children, i.e. to your son and daughter, which then opens up new other challenging discussions. So it's really all with discussions and trainings that they start realizing, okay, this gender unequal world creates problems for everyone. And I guess it's going to be small steps, step at a time, which can change the big picture. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Really inspiring. So yeah, with that, let's move to another presenter for today, Wessel van de Berg from South Africa with Sonke Gender Justice Network. And he is the Child Rights and Positive Parenting Unit Manager there. And he is also the Global Co-Coordinator of MenCare Global Campaign. So he will share with us about what Sonke is doing and how they have been able to tap onto mobilizing media narrative to apply public pressure for policy change in South Africa. So over to you, Wessel.
Thank you, Laxman. I'm going to just wave at everybody and say hi, this is me. It's lovely to be part of the presentation. And I'm going to switch my camera off because my connection doesn't seem to be that stable. But the audio should still continue.
Yes, Wessel, are you there? Looks like we can't hear you.
I'm here. I'm just waiting for the slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this was very much about our goal to increase paid parental leave for mothers and fathers in South Africa. Next slide, please. Currently, we only have 4 months maternity leave, and it's on a sliding scale up to 54%. This is based on what we call our unemployment insurance fund in South Africa, which is accumulated as you progress in your career. Apologies for the background traffic noise here. We don't have any leave for fathers or any other parents, and we only have 3 days family responsibility leave, which includes leave for funerals, weddings, and other family responsibilities. That's the current status. Next, please. So I'll be telling the story of a new Labour Law Amendment Bill that was approved by our National Assembly and Parliament last year, and it is about to be approved by our next mechanism, which is our Council of Provinces. The districts come together. It's only a routine approval. There's no changes expected. So we are very happy to have had the vote last year. What remains is for our president to now approve the amendment. So let me tell you a little bit about how we achieved this. Next slide, please. The new provisions, and I was happy to note the question earlier on that was asking about parental leave. It was very much to provide parental leave for all parents in South Africa. But we kept a strong focus on advocating for improved maternity leave while we were advocating for broader parental leave. So the allocation of payment for maternity leave has been increased to 66%. We now have paid parental leave of 10 days for parents that do not qualify for maternity leave. And the largest group of parents that fall in this category are fathers. The language is gender neutral, so you notice it doesn't say paternity leave of 10 days, but it says parents that do not qualify for maternity leave. So that opens it up for all genders and sexual orientations. And being an adoptive parent myself, I was very happy to have been part of advocating for a new category of adoption leave of 10 weeks for adoptive parents. And in South Africa, we have the opportunity to commission surrogate parents. And those parents who commission the surrogacy also qualify for adoption or for surrogacy leave of 10 weeks upon placement of the child. The next slide, please. So our use of the media has been on multiple levels. Firstly, it was, if we can look at the next slide. Firstly, it was the direct publication of opinion pieces. And I distinguish between proactive media and reactive media, where we respond to something that has happened in reactive media, or we propose or we generate the narratives that we want to see out there. So the publication of the opinion pieces is an example of the proactive media publication. And then we also heard about a man who had applied or had lodged a petition to Parliament to acquire leave because his children were born really prematurely. They were born, I think it was more than 6 weeks prematurely, and he needed the leave time to be at home with his children. He generated quite a lot of media by himself. So we then joined that reaction in the media and partnered with him in collaborating with him on the petition. So that's the poster that you see there. It was in the Cape Times in 2014, now 4 years ago, where the message that he had sparked reached quite a lot of readers in newspaper and on television and on radio. So those 3 channels were the main ones we used: press, radio, and television. So we also used the broadcast media. We have a few scripts on shows that we use to educate broadcasters on that they use when they do shows about fatherhood, a year or so, with journalists and broadcasters and writers to educate them about how to communicate about fatherhood in the media. The next slide, please. So here is a story that we had also responded to, and it became quite a strong advocacy point for us in our amendment to the bill, where we have had civil unions approved in South Africa or legal in South Africa for a few years now. And this case that we see on the slide is where a couple had to go to the court to qualify for, in inverted commas, maternity leave. And this was one of about 5 cases that were lodged by male parents in a couple who were aiming to adopt a child. And we just made the case in our advocacy that a same-sex marriage framework should allow for same-sex parenting. Next slide, please. So on the day that we were given the opportunity to make a proposal, we prepared a submission pack for the parliamentarians that we handed out to them using the Global MenCare Parental Leave platform, and a DVD and a short fact sheet and our submission written out. On the submission paper, you will see our partners in this. So Sonke did it with Mosaic Women's Centre in Cape Town. And it's worth mentioning that as we were developing our submission, we worked with a network of women's rights organizations, because our main case was that father's time for caregiving is a benefit to mothers and children as well as for fathers. So we really made the case that this was something that we were advocating for mothers. And there we have Yolanda and Tulani. Tulani is an employee at Sonke. At Sonke, we offer a month paid parental leave to fathers. And she was there talking about her experience of being a mother who benefited from the father having parental leave. So we brought her into Parliament to share her story. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'm not going to go through the whole timeline, just to sketch briefly where we started with influencing a policy framework called the White Paper on Families in 2011 to hold government departments accountable, right through to where we are now at the lobbying and the approved amendments that we have achieved. And interestingly enough, as predictable, the guiding question was whether our unemployment insurance fund can afford this. So it was a question not of the rights that people can access, but whether there's enough money to do this, unfortunately. So the next step and that was a key challenge for us, is to think outside the economic box. To end on the next step, we now expect the National Council of Provinces and the President to approve, and we are about to launch the State of South Africa's Fathers Report to coincide with the approval of parental leave in South Africa, and we will use the report over the next longitudinal period, hopefully 20 or 30 years, to track how fathers are using parental leave, starting from 2018, now that the leave is being launched. We have got a recent report in this document that shows that fathers who access child support funding, we have a child support grant in South Africa, and we just had a study released which showed that fathers who access the child support grant as the primary beneficiary of the child support grant use the money especially for childcare and don't use the money for anything else. So it's sad that that has to be surprising to anyone, but it does counter the myth that men are irresponsible with the resources they receive for childcare. And I think that's the last slide. Yes, there we are outside the Parliament with my colleagues from the various organizations. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wessel. Amazing work again. And really, any questions to Wessel?
Yeah, well, lots of questions have been asked over the last few slides, but not specifically to Wessel, but I did just a comment pops up from Revati Ramachandra. Maybe we should come up with a kit that presents the business case for parental protection to convince employers and the government to fund and pay for parental leave. So I guess that's kind of a suggestion to all of the presenters and to anyone who's engaged in this this work. Well, maybe one question, and to start with you actually, Wessel, to respond to that, and then we would love to hear from Suna and Ilze as well, is a reflection from Wessel, who asks, is fatherhood mostly about paternity leave? What about other aspects such as work-life balance and giving time to maternal and childcare? So really interested to hear your reflections on that, Wessel, and then from Ilze and Suna as well.
Sure. Thank you, Joni. I think within the MenCare Global Fatherhood campaign, we have identified gender equal. Oops, there's my time limit. We have identified gender equal parental, or sorry, let me use the full term, non-transferable paid leave for both parents as a key intervention to equip fathers with the time to provide caregiving. But I agree that there are, it's a much wider spectrum, both in terms of the normative items that you've just mentioned in terms of behavior change and the practical items, but then also in the policy landscape, there's also a wider range of things to think about, like, for example, like I mentioned, the child support grant. How do we have more fathers who are single parents access financial support for childcare? And then, of course, the accountability. How do we ensure that fathers who are responsible for maintenance and for child support or alimony that supports children, how do we ensure that fathers take responsibility for the financial provision too? One of the themes from the South African Fathers Report is that the narrow focus on financial provision by fathers is problematic if we reduce fathers to breadwinners. But it's really important that fathers take responsibility for breadwinning. It's not something that we want to replace or remove or cancel. We just want to make sure that the lens expands so that we ensure that fathers also are acknowledged or given the opportunity to provide more things than just money, like caregiving, time, and attention. There's a question here about the private sector.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would like to cluster a couple of questions around the private sector together, actually. But there is a question here from Regis Matutu, who's asking, how do you ensure or guarantee, if possible, that fathers actually use the parental leave to support mothers? And any work such as group education to fathers to understand the objective of parental leave. And again, I think that's also a question wonderful to hear from the others. So Wessel, if you could respond to that, and then we'll move over to Ilze and then to Suna.
No, and I think, you know, Ilze and Suna's presentation especially do speak to that the work on institutionalizing gender transformative support for fathers to engage in maternal health or in social welfare services, the interventions we've worked with, the media work, all of those fall across the spectrum. It's of course, the policy intervention is only one dimension, but it's not the end all of how to achieve this.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question. So to understand it, it was how can we ensure that the paternity leave for fathers is taken to support the mothers, right? And I think that is for me, it's not that the father should support the mother, but that it's really giving the opportunity to the father to be there with their child and to get a bonding with their child. And that's why we really promote solo care. So that means that the leave would be taken up after the mother is going back to work, because it will be easier for the mother then to go back to work with the father being home. But also it makes, we know from evidence that it's better for fathers to be the primary caregiver instead of being the assistant to the mother. And lastly, in the Netherlands, children are going on a very early age. After only 3 months, they go to kindergarten. And the longer we can make the time at home with one primary caregiver, we know it's better for children. So to answer the question, if we really promote solo care within the paternity leave, I mean, we all know if you will give the full responsibility for the baby to the father, I'm sure he will make use of that. But making him the assistant of the mother really, I don't think is the way forward if we want true emancipation or modern parenthood, as we say.
Would you like to come in?
Suna?
Yes, here I am. Okay. So I'll follow up from the previous question, and then I'll go into this one. Certainly, fatherhood is not all about paternal leave. And the involved fatherhood concept, the notion that we're talking about, we, in our trainings and our workshops, we try to tell people that it's actually a model of fatherhood where the father assumes responsibility. Just like Ilze, it's not just a support person, but actually is one of the main people, provides the necessary environment and opportunities for the child's development, and uses effective parenting methods in relation with their child. So in contrary to this masculinity patterns, we're talking about a role where the men adopts of a participatory and democratic approach, and paternal leave is simply one aspect, one dimension, just like Wessel is saying. And to be able to support the question, what if paternal leave increases, but then men simply use that time to do other things, or are simply supporting the mother in ways, but still the main role is with the mother. Exactly for that reason, we're very much advocating companies to endorse father support programs for their employees, because that's where we can actually talk about how to be an involved father, how to use the time more effectively. What does quality time spent with the child really mean and may look for fathers? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so there is a cluster of questions and comments around working with the private sector. So Adrian Hodges, in response to initially Ilze and Suna's presentation, asks to both of you, did you consider engaging with different business groups and coalitions, coalitions that already have established kind of shared social interests, to have a multiplier impact rather than one-on-one work with companies individually? So that's a question to Ilze and Suna, and also some information sharing there from Adrian, saying there is a movement of companies called Unstereotype Alliance that has been established by UN Women and Unilever, working on communications and advertising. So I think that's interesting for all of us working around MenCare and having an interest in working with the private sector. And he also mentions the link with Dove and Men+Care. So Dove, the company, is implementing under Men+Care a campaign on paternity leave. And I know that MenCare is interested in and has been working with Dove on this. So perhaps Wessel, if you feel so inclined, you could share a little bit more about that. There was a specific question to you, Wessel, as well, around whether the campaign in South Africa engages with the private sector or not. And then there was a question to Suna from Regis Matutu of the public sector in Turkey. So the motivation for the private sector work was that about 53% of workers work there. The question is, was there any other reason why to focus so much on the private sector, and what about the public sector? So a couple of questions and comments clustered there together. Perhaps we can first start with you again, Wessel, and then hear from Ilze and then from Suna.
Sure, thanks, Joni. The relationship with Unilever is really exciting. The Men Plus Care range was produced more or less the same time that MenCare launched as a campaign, coincidentally, not purposefully. And we've just had an agreement where the research that especially Promundo did in the US about fathers' experience of either having paternity leave by their company or not has become a source of evidence for the current paternity leave campaign by Dove Men Plus Care. So it's a really great collaboration. In South Africa, we did work with the Business Chamber, or the other name now is the Cape Business Council, on our submission on parental leave. In that space, we've also worked with the main confederations of trade unions. But then our main engagement with the private sector has been quite adversarial through strategic litigation with the mining sector. And it's related to care work because the impact of mine workers returning home increases the care burden on the women who have to care for them. But it's not directly related to fatherhood. So that is the extent of our work with the private sector here.
All right. Thank you. Ilze?
Yeah, so we did work a lot with front runners companies, but it was difficult to find an alliance of companies that were working on this. One was the greatest place to work, which is I don't know if it's outside of the Netherlands as well, but it's a rating where you can rate your company whether it's a good place to work, and paternity leave was one of them, one of the issues, and that was quite successful, that collaboration. But it's a big wish of me to connect the various issues on environment, social issues, emancipation, but also sexual harassment and so on together. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. And what I've done a lot of thinking about is that for companies, it makes it easy to go from one cause to the other cause. And to give an example, for example, Shell, who has, of course, major issues with human rights and environmental damage they're causing. And then they show on their website all those family-friendly policies and really showcasing them as a good company. Now, I think that we as NGOs always have to be very critical on that kind of images that a company wants to bring forward, because I wonder whether it's because they really are supportive of our cause for good work-life balance, or whether it's to counter the severe allegations of human rights violations. So it's always, it's a challenge.
Interesting.
Okay, and I can talk about, first of all, why we're working individually with the companies. Now, this is still a very relatively new initiative, and working with advertisement companies, in addition to certain big corporate companies, has served actually the multiplier effect, because like I said, the ad companies are the ones who are influencing the stereotypes and the messages that are surrounding us. And to the question of why we're working with private sector and what about the public sector. Now, we have been, as ACEV, working with the public sector and partnering closely with the ministries in Turkey for the last 25 years, since 1993. And Turkey has a very centralized education system. So to be able to work in the public school system, you would have to always work very closely with the ministries, like I said. Now, a few things have changed. One, working with the public sector recently, due to certain politics in Turkey, has become a bit more difficult. And I won't go into the detail here. And secondly, we actually wanted to also find some innovative ways, because until now, probably like any other NGO in the world, we've been partnering with the private sector simply to receive funds from them. So they've been only approached until now as a money resource. But we realized they can actually do much more than that. If they can collaborate with us in this cause, and they can also start taking action, this also in itself is a huge multiplier effect. So the two questions actually have a common strategy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Maybe in kind of to round off this block around the private sector question, shares an idea. Because many companies are publicly committing and reporting to the SDGs, and there are a number of SDGs that this could ladder up to, right? There's one target in the SDGs specifically around unpaid care. And so basically using that framework as an entry point with companies can be, for many of us, a way to go. And I know that several of you have actually been doing that in the presentations that you've been sharing. There is a link with the SDGs there. I want to shift gears a little bit. Uma Sal asked the question. Uma Salma, thank you. To Ilze initially, is there any religious challenge in the work that you've been presenting? And I think that's also a very interesting question to actually ask to all panelists. And also thinking, Suna, you reflected a little bit or referred a little bit to it, but I can imagine Turkey is also a very challenging context. And increasingly so to work on these issues. And I would imagine so can South Africa be. Ilze, maybe first to you, as the question was first asked to you, and then we would like to hear from Wessel and then from Suna on this question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting because maybe for the Netherlands, that's not the first thing you think about, but we do have strong Christian parties in the Netherlands. And when we were in discussion, we noticed that the strong motherhood ideology is coming partly from the Christian background, and you have Christian Democrats who are supporting our cause because they really feel that the family should have more, should get more space next to work. But then you have the more, how do you say that? More the Christian parties that are stricter in their thinking, and they were not so supportive of this leave because they feel that the mother should stay at home and there should not be space for other partners to do that. So, but I wouldn't call it directly opposition because it was in the Netherlands really the business argument, and I think that Wessel also shared that. How are we going to pay for this leave? And it's too much money. And what I noticed is that argument, that financial argument, is often used to support an idea that is in the back of their heads that actually we don't need this leave because mothers can take care, right? So although the financial argument is often used, I feel it's not really the main argument. There's a gender bias in the back of their heads.
Joni, could you just repeat the specific question again on religion?
Yes, of course. The question was quite straightforward. Is there any religious challenge in the work that you've been presenting?
Yes, I think especially on the fatherhood work, we do not have so much a religious direct opposition, which I think is actually a bit more problematic, that we do not have the opposition. I say that in comparison to our work on corporal punishment and prohibiting corporal punishment in South Africa, where there's quite a strong opposition, and then it makes the debate explicit and you can engage in it. The problem with the promotion of gender equal fatherhood is that it's misinterpreted as a message to bring fathers back as the head of the household. And there's a lot of agreement that fathers are important, but it is not along the grounding of gender equality that we are promoting. So that's a bit harder to navigate, because you might have agreement on the surface, but actually when it gets to who does the care work, there is a lot of disagreement. So we have worked in various ways with religious sectors. both in working with progressive leaders to share their message. We on Sonke staff, we have quite a few religious leaders who actually work with us. So we are doing the work that's required to translate those narratives into more feminist narratives. But it is necessary to keep an eye open for whether the support that you receive is actually in line with your values.
So I can share the Turkish side. Now, the problems are very similar to what Wessel and Ilze described, interestingly similar, but our solutions have been slightly different. So first of all, certainly there is increasingly a conservative mindset and approach in Turkey. No doubt it would be hard to even deny that. Now, how do we deal with that? I would be able to, similar to Wessel, we don't try to vocalize a feminist narrative. On the contrary, we try to use fatherhood as a soft entry point. And just like he's saying, yes, when we're talking about empowering fathers, sometimes it does go into directions where fathers are already more comfortable taking role. So certainly it's difficult. We really try to start from a very soft place where people are not going to be threatened or intimidated or turned off by talking about gender equality, but talking about how their fathers treated themselves, and how they may have been impacted negatively, so that it can actually turn into, would you like to do the same thing to your children, or would you like to give them an equal opportunity? Look at your relationship with your own father. From such an authoritarian perspective, you may have a distant relationship. Would you now like to change that for your own child? So these are the very subtle ways we try to combat, because certainly we have a very conservative atmosphere here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Oh, it was me. I'm echoing myself. Yeah, thank you. I think, the issues around religion that Salma is talking about is they are planning to start the new fatherhood project in Bangladesh. And the religious conservative groups in Bangladesh are very strong, who sort of connect any work with fatherhood by any women's rights or child rights organization as something a big threat to them. So, I have been thinking since the beginning also on, so it's great that we are advocating for parental leave and discussing about, men's role within the household. One thing that keeps on coming, and we keep on discussing as well, is how much of that argument also is about, allowing women to go out of the household as well. Because in most of the contexts where we work in, including many of the contexts that you all are working, there is this, phenomena of where women are restricted within the household primarily. And that's also the reason why, a lot of women go into part-time work, not rather full-time. So was wondering if you have any thoughts around and how you have been handling this challenge of, yes, at the same time we are talking about men's involvement in household, but that does not sort of come in a manner that to influence where women have been enjoying power within kitchen, for example, but not, we are forcing men to be there now. So, that keeps on coming as a question to a lot of work we've been doing. So would love to hear some thoughts there. Anyone can start. Yeah,
it's a difficult question, Laxman, because if you, we focused it really on the child and not so much at the home care work. But we all, yeah, it's, I think it is something that will evolve after when the change will come. But we have been now for over 15 years, there has been no change in our emancipation parameters. And that's why we push so much for paternity leave, because that is really a way to make a breakthrough. But we didn't discuss so much equal share in household, because we hope that cultural change will follow the policy change. But we have to work quite hard on that, I realize. And we also realize it's a less popular message to share. And I think one of the things that we can do is working with, for example, the care professionals that are around before and after birth. In the Netherlands, we have a special system for that. And that's one of the ideas we have to work and educate those people to train fathers in the care and in the household tasks when a child arrives, so that it's not just that not only the mother is addressed in the care giving sessions with those professionals. Is that answering?
Suna?
Yeah, I can briefly try to answer that, but I agree that's a tough question, and we haven't really come to that place where, I mean, the reason we don't go there much is because we try to also immerse some themes around empathy and conflict resolution in just like Ilze said, child rearing, child development, and how to provide a supportive environment. So when we're talking about setting up a democratic environment between fathers and children, we're also talking about, they go hand in hand in the sessions, we're talking about how to treat your spouse, how to treat your child, and how you were treated by your own parents. So that's number one. And number two is, in our State of the Fathers report, it was, the findings showed that fathers were less involved in stereotypically more mothers' roles. For example, when the child was sick, the father would take the child to the hospital because it's something outside the house. Or when there is a school meeting, the father does attend the school meeting because it's, again, something outside the home, and it's perceived as usually, typically, more of a men's role. So when we're talking about equal gender parenting, we really encourage both the spouses to start empathizing and supporting one another in a gender transformative way, so that the women don't feel like their role is completely stolen. And lastly, working the private sector, it gives you an opportunity to work with both men and women under the same place and openly discuss these things. Because even when the women are working in the private sector, they were sharing with us that they were the ones who were working at the workplace, but then also going home and having to take care of the child in the evening. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I realize that's a quite, yeah, Wessel, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Laxman.
No, that's quite a challenging question, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think, you know, from our side, like I mentioned briefly in my presentation, we also advocated for improved maternity leave to make employment easier for mothers, alongside the fact that we advocated for better parental leave for other parents too. I think within the intervention, it's many of us know Program P and various applications of it. Action Aid and Oxfam have got similar varieties of couples using time use diaries to make the time use by each of the if it's a heterosexual couple, a man and woman, their time use, make it explicit. And I think that also helps to map out how much time is being spent earning an income by either partner. And I have to say from my own experience that led to one of the hardest but the most rewarding conversations in my own relationship, when we actually did the time use diary that we were promoting to other people to do.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's very important to keep in mind on being very informed, and that's what relates to what Adrian was mentioning earlier. Is if you look at connect with the SDG, indicators, I think it will something as well. It sort of revolves around that aspect as well. And we are almost towards the end, and we have a last question from Habib from Bangladesh. What strategy would you like to recommend to work with the parliamentarians with fatherhood and from your experience? So maybe, Ilze, you can answer this based on what you have done for the last, we have 4 minutes left.
Yeah. Yeah, what I would really recommend is to make it a little bit fun. So that was what we did with the action. They really like that. Ensure that they get a platform in media as well to make sure that they can tell their story. And lastly, really start from the personal, because in the end, this is personal, and you will end up talking personal stuff anyway. So you can better start with it. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Yes, so I think this is, we believe, is the beginning of the conversation. This is not the end, and we will be, in connection with each other to continue learning and sharing from each other based on the different experiences we have in the work around engaging men in fatherhood, or men in unpaid care work, or men in care, or redistributing paid care work as well. So I think this is quite an important entry point to advance our agenda of advancing women's rights and gender justice as we stand, and especially connecting that to the added value addition we bring as dismantling or transforming the notions around be a man and father in this perspective. So we'll continue this learning journey as we move on. And anything from you?
Yeah, a practical question was asked on whether we will be sharing the presentation, and yes, a recording has been made, and that will definitely be shared with all the participants. And echoing the comments in the chat box, fantastic work has been presented. Thank you very much to the panelists for sharing, and it was a very interesting conversation. I think learned a lot, so thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you all the participants for bearing with us for 1.5 hours and staying with us. This is really energizing. Thank you all. And thanks to Nina for all the background support. That was important.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.